So, before I go into this one, I do want to say I have nothing against religion itself. I think when spirituality, faith, gods, any of these different things, when it's approached with love and open-mindedness and compassion, I think any religion can be potentially really, really good for someone. Whatever you follow, if it feels good in your heart, I think that's what's right. But I did want to talk about something I've been thinking about recently. So one thing I've noticed from a lot of, when I see online ex-cult members or former cult members or former members of extremist religious sects or subdivisions, is that one of the biggest things that it seems a lot of times deconverts experience in their trauma is this idea of they were taught from an early age there is something fundamentally broken and wrong about them, and that they are inherently wrong and need to be fixed and need to be saved, and that they're not worthy of the love of God or different things or the love of their fellow man until they accept whatever the rules are of whatever belief system it is. And the reason I bring this up is, even though I was not raised in a religious household, I was taught very similar things to this in my own upbringing, where I was raised in an atheist household, but I grew up with one person in particular who, for me, destroyed my mental health, in my opinion. And one of the things they would use to do that was repeatedly teaching me that the way I naturally am as a disabled person, which they did not know that at the time, but it does not excuse the abuse. They would tell me that they're essentially, like, this wasn't in their words, but the message they sent to me, the message that I internalized as a kid for years, was there is something fundamentally broken about you and you need to be fixed. And their idea of fixing me was conforming me to whatever systems, the family system, the school system, whatever it was, making sure I could fit the mold. And that involved years of medication, years of therapy that weren't really helpful because at the time I was so deeply caged that I couldn't even talk to my therapists about what was really hurting me a lot of the time, because I didn't know. I was a kid and I just blamed myself for whatever was going on. But that idea of, you are broken, you need to be fixed, there's something wrong with you, and unless you do what we say, you won't be enough. That is something I very deeply resonate with, because that is what I believed my entire life until last year. And for me, my form of faith, my form of spirituality actually got me out of that and, like, helped me combat that. So it's sort of the opposite, I would say, of a lot of, but it's very similar. The emotions and the experience itself is very similar, I would say, to what I see happening in a lot of, like, people who leave extremist belief systems, because it's teaching them that in order to be happy, they have to be miserable and just do whatever everyone around them is telling them to do. And even though I was raised in an atheist household, I was taught the same things. And I think it's a little bit very sadly ironic, because the person who ingrained into me the most of that, not only do I think they probably weren't aware that they were doing it necessarily at first, but also in their own upbringing, it seemed like, because they used to be religious, they were taught that unless they could accept, in their case, Jesus, or these different rules that they weren't enough and that they would be broken. And yet, even though they weren't religious anymore when I was growing up, they still taught that to me and put that on me in a way that broke me and stopped me from being able to be my real self around anyone, even my own self. I couldn't be my real self around my own self. And part of that is like my autism, but part of it was my mask was, in my opinion, built. The mask of the person I used to be was built from truly believing that if I was my real self around people, that if I chose my happiness over other people's rules or over other people's happiness, that there was something fundamentally broken and evil about me, and that I would be sinful and needed to repent. And I distinctly remember being in high school cutting myself because I wanted to pay, and I wanted to pay with blood. And that's not okay. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a toxic family relationship or a cult or a comparably cult-like upbringing, even if it's not religious. No child should grow up feeling like they are fundamentally broken. And no one starts out that way. Some people are taught very, very young. I was, from at least 9 and upwards, but I know people where it started even younger than that, and it doesn't have to be that way. And you are deserving of love. And the thing is, if you actually read a lot of these same religious texts people are using to perpetuate these really, in my opinion, evil and harmful ideas, Jesus never said in the Bible that unless you follow his teachings to the letter, that you are a horrible sinner who's going to burn forever. He did not say that. And also, on the flip side, if someone who isn't religious is not listening to you, is making you feel like you're worthless unless you boost their view of reality, and that you're fundamentally broken unless you fit into their views on things, that's just as harmful. And it teaches the same message, that there's something wrong with you and you need us to be right. But that's not true. And I think it's important for people who are survivors of trauma, in order to not repeat that cycle of you must believe what I believe or you're broken. I think we have to teach ourselves to heal our own trauma and let go of as much of it as we can, but also be aware that whatever someone believes, it's not what they believe, it's how you act and treat yourself and your fellow man. That's important. And the connections we make with each other should not be taken for granted. And love is one of the most beautiful and amazing gifts in this world. And I just think it's very, very sad that a lot of people think they don't deserve it. And that wanting happiness, wanting love, makes them somehow wrong. I don't think that's true.